R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are so excited to continue our amazing Pride Month celebrations with the Epic Pride Tour. The Epic Pride Tour is 4 incredible authors, 3 who are visiting us from out of town, and 1 who is one of our faves always, Becky Albertalli. They are touring the country, talking about some great queer books. And so we're going to get right into it. So I'll introduce our moderator, Becky Albertalli, first. Becky, who uses she, her pronouns, is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the William C. Morris Award winner and National Book Award longlist title, Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, The Upside of Unrequited, Leah on the Offbeat, the Simon verse novella Love Creekwood, What If It's Us, which was co-written with Adam Silvera, Yes, No, Maybe So, co-written with Aisha Saeed, and Kate in Waiting. Your bio is already out of date because you are so prolific. So it is actually most recently Imogen, obviously, which is one of the books that we are celebrating here tonight. A beautiful book that folks are already connecting with and very excited about. And Becky lives here with her family in Atlanta. And we're always very proud to get to call Becky one of ours here in Atlanta. So welcome, Becky. And then from left to right, we have Abdi Nazemian, who is the author of Like a Love Story, a Stonewall Honor Book, and The Authentics. His novel, The Walk-In Closet, won the Lambda Literary Award for LGBT debut fiction. His screenwriting credits include the films The Artist's Wife, The Quiet, and Menendez Blood Brothers, and the television series The Village and Almost Family. He's been an executive producer and associate producer on numerous films, including Call Me By Your Name, Little Woods, and The House of Tomorrow. He lives in Los Angeles with his husband, their 2 children, and their dog, Disco. So welcome, Abdi. We're so happy that you're here. And we are celebrating only this beautiful moment tonight. Next to Abdi is Jason June, who I should have said also that Abdi uses he, him pronouns. Jason June uses he, him, and she, hers pronouns. Jason is here to celebrate Riley Weaver Needs a Date to the Gaybutante Ball. And if you missed it, we do have Gaybutante Ball hats. Yes. So get you a hat so that you can rep it officially. Jason is gay and femme and loves nothing more than a good pair of heels. Sometimes late in the tour, you need a good pair of flats. He is the New York Times bestselling author of Out of the Blue, Jay's Gay Agenda, and more books about queer love and lust and chaotically gay shenanigans. He lives in Austin, Texas, with his husband and their Pomeranian, Pom Brokaw, both of whom would be his escorts to the Gaybutante Ball. So welcome, Jason. We're very glad you're here. And last but not least, Sonora Reyes is a queer second-generation immigrant who is the best-selling author of The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. They write fiction full of queer and Latinx characters in a variety of genres. Sonora is also the creator and host of #QPOC Chat, a monthly community-building Twitter chat for queer writers of color. They currently live in Arizona in a multi-generational family home with a small pack of dogs who run the place. We were very honored to just be in New York and see them win a Lambda Literary Award, which is awesome. And we were winners together, which was really exciting. Yes, thank you. And Sonora is here tonight in celebration of the Luis Ortega Survival Club. So I want to let folks know whether you are watching virtually or in person here, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. If you're watching virtually, you can put your questions in the chat and I'll vocalize them for you. And if you are watching here, I'm going to bring you a mic so that everybody can hear you both in the room and online. So without further, I do want to say, yes, we have amazing swag. And there's also going to be some other surprises, I think, thanks to our some of our friends in the YA community. So without further ado, Becky, thank you.
Here, I have been so excited about this event. First, I want to say I also have a dog. I feel like, but his name is Teddy, so it's like a pretty basic kind of name. But yeah, I cannot emphasize enough. These were already three of my favorite authors, as I'm sure they all know because they've not been subtle about it. And I am absolutely obsessed with every single one of the books that we are going to be celebrating tonight. So I'm going to try to be cool about it. I am going to try to make sure that my questions make sense. I'm going to also try to avoid spoilers too, because I know that all of our TBRs are very, very long. And yeah, and just if there are any books on this panel that you have not read yet, you are going to want to. So I'm not going to spoil you. And also too, I'm not texting. I have my notes app pulled up. Yeah, and I'm definitely not on TikTok. No, truly not on TikTok. No, okay. Well, first question I want to ask before we even get into the books is just, y'all have been touring for a minute. We're nearing the end, right? I want to know. This is okay. The grand finale.
Yeah,
All right.
this is the last stop.
I want the highlight reel and the blooper reel.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, my highlight, this might be cheating, was winning a Lammy. Because that was right before the tour started. That was like the best day of the year so far for me. It was amazing. But my highlight of this tour, with y'all. So sorry to leave you out of that one because I was here first. So I came early for the award ceremony and everything. But I think the coolest part about this tour was doing hair and makeup for. We did a little media tour one day in New York where we filmed a bunch of interviews and stuff. And it was a studio where they did our hair and makeup, and it was so it was weird, but it was really cool. Yeah, it was so cool.
And it was so much makeup.
It was so much makeup.
I told him, I'm
yeah.
I just want to look natural, but make me, so that under the lights I look like myself. And then when I went home, they gave us a wipe, and I started wiping. I'm like, God,
Yeah.
what is on my face?
Yeah.
Welcome to my life.
And we found out it was Barry Manilow's makeup artist, and I'm like, well, of course I look like Barry Manilow.
That's funny.
My highlight was probably on the second day. We got to go into the HarperCollins offices and speak to all the Harper family there from every single department. And so it was really cool because we're all sitting alone in front of our computers all the time, including them sitting alone at their computer answering emails. To actually face-to-face geek out over books was really, really nice.
Yeah.
I liked that.
Oh, God, I was going to say that too. And now, no, well, because it was very sweet because, people don't realize I live in Los Angeles. We all live in different places, Texas, Arizona, and you don't get to meet everyone who works on your book. I mean, you mostly talk to your editor. So we were at Harper and all these people are coming up to us after the panel. We had a meet and greet and they're like, oh, I did the interior design for your book, or I'm doing the marketing, or I'm reaching out to schools. It was just so sweet, to meet the huge amount of people who contribute to getting these books out there. I don't know, what would it be? There was also a blooper.
Yeah, don't
forget
the
Blooper?
I forgot about
blooper.
blooper.
It
Blooper.
actually has been very smooth.
Yeah.
I mean, God.
Yeah.
What would an example
Do
of
we
a
have a
blooper,
blooper?
be? Tripping and falling and hitting your face or something?
Oh, I mean, I've got several. There's, your tights fall down and you have to kind of try to discreetly pull them up for the whole.
I have one. I don't think I said it. I don't think I said it out loud because we were on the air, but I farted and I don't know if anyone
Actually, you know, when my husband's aunt called about us being on Good Morning America in Toledo, she did mention hearing someone.
No, she
Flat
didn't. Oh my god. I'm horrified. Like it was like quiet enough, but also like we had mics and stuff, so I wasn't so sure. But
It sounded like we had a trumpet soundtrack.
oh my god, that was so embarrassing. I can't believe I said that.
I love it.
I don't have enough. I didn't fart while we were shooting. No. Also, I just want to say it's very cool that you're here. That's a highlight because, like, when I started writing YA, Simon was one of the books that I read that inspired me. It was very much like we're not going to let you ask another question. We're just going to talk and talk. But I came to YA after a decade of doing screenwriting and producing, and like I had so much trouble getting queer stuff made, and it was so disappointing to me that the stuff I was doing wasn't what was from my heart. And books like Simon and Aristotle and Dante, and there was a group of books that I read, and I'm like, wait a minute, why am I not writing in this space? Like, this is the space I want to be in. So you like opened doors for so many of us and made us dream of telling stories. Like, that's the fact that you're here supporting us is very meaningful. So
Agreed.
Here.
That is a very generous framing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm hugely honored to be here. And and I'm a fan of all of y'all. I want to do the thing that I always forget to do until like almost the end of the event. But I'm remembering now. I want to just kind of like go down and do like the quick elevator pitch for the new books. So do you want to start with Sonora?
Sure,
No.
I can start.
No.
Is this is on, right? Okay, great.
I needed a blooper. I cursed myself. I said I didn't have a blooper, and I knocked JJ's water over.
Wonderful.
We got it.
We got it.
And I'm going to fart later.
Okay, perfect. So the Luis Ortega Survival Club is basically John Tucker Must Die meets Promising Young Woman, but make it YA without the murder. So it's a revenge story about a girl named Ariana Ruiz who is autistic, and she has selective mutism, so she doesn't talk unless she feels extremely comfortable, which is not a lot throughout the book. And she teams up with an anonymous pen pal to get revenge on this guy, and may or may not fall in love in the process with her fellow revenge getter. Yeah.
So Riley Weaver Needs a Date to the Gaybutante Ball is Harper's campiest title. And I've told them they're not allowed to put another campy title through if it comes across that, or else it's a battle. And it follows the titular character, because you always have to throw the word titular into when you're giving the elevator speech, who is gay and femme and wants to get into the Gaybutante Society, which is this unfortunately fictional but world-renowned organization full of queer teen tastemakers. And it culminates in the Gaybutante Ball. And femme Riley is told by a very toxically masculine gay classmate that Riley is too femme to get a date for the ball, because gay guys are like dudes who like dudes, man. And so Riley's like, oh, huh, and starts a podcast detailing the ups and downs of dating while gay and femme, and hopefully finding a date for the ball.
And Only This Beautiful Moment is an intergenerational story about three generations of men in the same Iranian family. So it takes place in the 1930s, the 1970s, and present day in both Los Angeles and Tehran. And it's about how family secrets and anti-queer legislation and the history of the Middle East and of American intervention in the Middle East has impacted this family's trajectory across the world, and also their relationship with each other and their intimacy with each other, and how they eventually come together by shedding all the secrets and telling their truths.
Right. I cannot even tell you, and these books are even better than they sound, which, and they're all really different. But one thing that I think all three of you have in common that I wanted to kind of start off with is, as authors, and then also these books, like masterclass in voice. The characters, and particularly the point of view characters, absolutely feel like real people. Yeah, I mean, and the entire ensembles surrounding them do as well. After you've got 3 of them, like, I want to know just I want to know kind of what your process is and kind of how you get there. And also too, since this is nobody's first rodeo. So has it gotten more challenging? Has it gotten easier as you've been kind of writing more books to develop these characters and make them sound like themselves?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. Okay, I can do it. Okay, so voice, I think, is one of the parts of writing that comes more like, I guess, naturally to me. Just because I think I tend to write very conversationally, like kind of how I think in my head, but I'm very good at I was gonna make a bad joke. Okay, so I'm gonna make it. It's fine. I not like getting dark or anything here. I'm schizoaffective. I have voices in my head, right? So like sometimes they have personalities, and like sometimes I can just channel like different types of personalities. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But like it's really like for me, like it's easy to get into another mindset of like, oh, this person, okay, she's got a chip on her shoulder, she's, she takes things literally, she doesn't do like these kinds of, metaphors or whatever. And like I have like a few like key things, and then I'm like, okay, I am you now, right, while I'm drafting this book. So yeah, and I don't, it has gotten a little bit harder with each book just because I want each book to feel different, while also still feeling like me. So I have to kind of keep that in mind. But so far, I think I haven't run out of personalities to give my characters. So yeah.
I'm a self-described gay Muppet, and like I cannot turn that off. I mean, gay Muppets are camp and flamboyant, and that just is what instantly comes naturally. My resting face is that open mouth Muppet smile, like that. That's always it. So when I'm going between my characters, it's leaning into the camp of it all, and then just inserting whatever their little like ism is. Like Riley's is his overriding need for justice, but make it camp. Or Jay's is his outrageous Virgo type A list making tendencies, but make it camp. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And Crest and Out of the Blue, they're very sarcastic and think humans are disgusting. So like lean into that and make it camp. That's kind of how it always goes for me. I wish I could do something else, but I can't. That's all I got in me.
It's a great question, because voice to me is what the most important part of a book is, and it's often the hardest part to find. It's the part, like I used to teach screenwriting, and like to me it was always voice. Like, how do I teach voice? How do I tell people how to like create that? And when I started writing a book, the first book I wrote while doing a book called The Artist's Way. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. If you haven't, you should look into it. It really did change my life and the way I write, and made me much more, for lack of a better word, a spiritual writer who doesn't plot anything out and who shows up to the page searching for a voice. And I mean, like you, I wait for a character to talk through me. I don't write every day. I don't go in with any preconceived notions of what will happen plot wise. And so it really is sometimes a system of trial and error. I'm very good at writing like 50 to 100 pages of books that I abandon because I'm like, this character doesn't feel like they want to speak through me anymore, and I'm feeling this resistance, and so that's so it doesn't get any easier, because I always leave myself with this like totally blank page, and I'm like, why am I doing this? It's torture. But when you find it, when the voice speaks through you, it's the most beautiful experience. It's like it feels like you have like a new best friend.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And so another thing too that that I'm just in awe of with all three of you, but I'm gonna like get a little specific this time. Are the really complex, interesting relationships, and that can be with significant others, but also friends, families, and I just like that was one of the things that with these three new books in particular that jumped out at me. So I kind of have questions that are sort of specific to each of you, but kind of all under that umbrella because y'all all blew me away as always. But so the first question I have is for Sonora, and one thing I loved about Luis Ortega, well, not the person, not the character.
Yeah.
The book. Oh, that's complicated. Yeah, like you can't really. Yeah. No, I'm gonna just say the
Survival Club. Yeah.
the club. Yeah.
He
okay.
lost.
Yeah. No, I truly do not love him.
Yeah.
But I loved the complexity of Ari's feelings toward Luis, which shifts over time. Her understanding of kind of that dynamic shifts over time. And Shawnee, I'm not going to spoil. Shawnee, another member of the club, also has some complicated feelings. What was it like leaving space for that complexity? Because that's a tough one to navigate, and you did it beautifully.
Thank you so much. I think I really wanted to get to this idea of that Ari and everyone in the club, really, none of them are like the perfect victim, right? Where you would see this story and be like, oh, this person, their case is going to get won in court, or like, none of them fit that mold of like someone who people want to listen to, who people like would just gravitate, especially because of a lot of it is because of those complicated feelings. Like what happens when someone who really hurts you have feelings for, and you can't just separate those feelings from what happened as soon as it happens, especially if you don't fully understand the gravity of what's happened, which Ari doesn't at first. So I really wanted to show that they are all fully complicated people with complicated feelings, and they're angry and real and messy, and they still deserve justice. And that is just like the most important thing, is they deserve their happy ending, and they're going to fight for their happy ending, regardless of what everyone else thinks they would deserve.
And for Jason June, great. So I've already like talked your ear off a little bit about this, but these are blooper after blooper.
Just you wait.
Are you gonna pee the couch? Are you but so I really want to ask about the tension that erupts in this book between Riley and his friend Sabrina, which, like, one of the things that's so cool to read about this is not at all a romantic kind of dynamic. Like, they are a platonic bestie duo, and it felt very real, and it was as deep and as intense as any romantic conflict would have been, which I appreciated so much. Talk a little bit, if you will, about kind of what are some of the things you were interested in exploring with the two of them.
Yeah. So Riley and Sabrina and Nick make up this like friendship tricycle, or Riley describes them as the bestie sandwich, and Nick and Sabrina are the two people keeping him together, and he oftentimes just feels like wet turkey lunch meat. Like that needs to be held together.
Aw.
And Sabrina and him are the two flamboyant ones of the bunch. They're the ones that instantly get emotional about things. That it's like the world is crumbling down around us and nothing's ever going to solve it. And Nick is like, okay, whoa, wait a minute. So obviously, because they're the two very emotional ones, that can either be like super great when only one of them is having a problem at a time, but when they're both having problems and can't be there for each other because they each need to focus on themselves, they're the personalities that are like, my issue is the biggest issue. And if we're focusing on you right now, you're a bad friend because you're not focusing on me. And I think that's really common as teens, especially, to not understand that we all are the center and the main character in our own story. So like our problems will take precedence, but you have to be able to find the balance in life to still contribute to everything else around you. You aren't actually the center of the universe, despite, how great that would be if we were. So I really wanted to explore that. And I really wanted to explore it in this day and age where I think we increasingly are divided and we increasingly hear some sort of refrain of, well, if it's not good for you, set that aside. You don't have to worry about it if it's not putting you in the right mental space or whatever. And that can be true and correct and healthy to an extent. But then you can also sort of stunt your own growth in terms of dealing with problems head on or letting other people bring their problems to you when it's not really the best time for you right now. We have to understand that the world isn't perfect and it isn't going to always go according to our schedule. And the best thing we can do for our friendships is to tackle those hard times, and we can come together stronger than if we'd never had that problem at all.
This actually kind of moves us so well into what I wanted to ask Abdi about. There are so many really, it's hard to pick which dynamic I wanted to ask about, but I was so moved by the journey that we saw with two of your narrators in particular. They're all like father, son, so these are kind of the middle and the youngest of the narrators. So you have Saeed, who is the dad, like the middle, the dad,
the middle generation,
and Mood, who is kind of the modern day youngest of the three. One of the things that I loved about this book is like a dynamic I think we don't see a ton is a character like Saeed, the dad, who is like not the most affirming parent to a gay son for much of the book, and that's coming from Mood's point of view, and it's also like we are also in his head during a third of the book as well. But the narrative doesn't write him off, and I would love to hear more about that choice because I just like in tears over it,
Thank you. That means a lot. I'm really happy if you were to pick a relationship that's moving to me that you picked that one, because it is very grounded in my own emotional experience. And, growing up, I was born in Iran. We moved when I was 2 during the revolution. We went, by the time I was 10, I had already lived in France, Canada, and then moved to the US. But I started to realize I was gay at a very young age, and my parents came from a very conservative background and culturally was very conservative. There was no queer life, and it was also the height of AIDS epidemic. So you're dealing with the only knowledge they have of what being gay means is stigma and shame and death and all of that. And when I did find the courage to start coming out slowly, I didn't have one coming out. I had like 100 coming out. My parents were not the most affirming, and that's just the truth. And I definitely was surrounded by a lot of like American friends who had much more progressive liberal families who would tell me things like, you shouldn't go see your family, or they don't deserve you, or things like that. But, in my culture, family loyalty really trumps everything else. And that's so much of why I wanted to write this book. And the truth is, like, over time, my parents and my culture and their friends have come quite a long way. And I think a lot of that is because I gave them the grace and the empathy and the patience of letting them sort their own stuff out, their own feelings out about it. And also, and so much of what inspired this book is, as an adult, I started to question what they were going through and what's their story. My parents who like left a country and a language and who lost family members in a revolution and had to flee with their kids and give them a new life. I'm like, why? Who are these people to tell me not to speak to these people who sacrificed so much and went through so much? And part of what I wanted to do with this book is present the father for the first time through Mood's eyes as someone who, he's not some, horrific father who is abusive or anything. He just denies. Which is very much what my culture did. Like when I came out, it was like constantly conveniently forgotten. It was like, oh, yes, you told us you're gay, but we've decided to put that in that little compartment. And so it's like you first meet Saeed that way, and then you go back to the 1970s and you see him as this young kid full of dreams for his country and falling in love, and you start to piece together. And I really wanted to do that because I think it's really important for young people. I mean, of course, we all need to stay safe and make sure that we're not putting ourselves in dangerous situations. But I do think, and as a parent myself, we sometimes owe our parents that empathy, because when we're young, the whole world, talk about the world revolving around just you. Like that's what adolescence is. Yeah. But once you grow up, you start to look at your parents like, wow, you went through a lot too, and you deserve your story, where I'm just a supporting character. So, I do want to say, just so, because I've said this, my dad has not read one of my books until this one. I thought you might find that interesting.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. My books were always too much for my parents. They're too gay. They're always like, no, we can't. But my dad took this book to Central Park and read the whole thing and called me to say how much he loves it. And I feel like of all the stories, like this father-son story, it just shows you how much people can grow and how relationships can change.
That's so much more beautiful than my story of when my dad read my dad read Simon. Like he's read more than Simon, but he immediately called me and asked me to speak about the last chapter I wanted to speak about with him, which was chapter 9, which is an intimate chapter with intimate with Simon and himself. So
I knew which chapter you were talking about as soon as you said it. I was like,
so if you want to know why leg, none of my books since then have ever had anything like it. So I love.
At least it's not Jay's gay gender where I have a word for dick in every paragraph. It's like, Dad, what did you think about it? It's colorful.
so funny.
Yeah. They conveniently leave that part out, which makes sense.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
One of the things that all three of you do is y'all really dig into some of this intra-community, like just some of the I don't want to say discourse. Discourse sounds like a bad word to me these days, but like some of these like conversations that are happening within the queer community or within queer communities, and you do it with so much nuance, and there's so many like really interesting angles that you take. I want to start with Abdi for this one. So talking a little bit about like you had spoken about Saeed's growth and kind of navigating that in the story, and how that diverges from some of the narratives that we see, particularly in a lot of white queer stories. So I think one of the things I wanted to ask you about is the ways you have the intersection coming up between Mood's Persian identity and his queerness, kind of leading to some points of conflict with his white boyfriend, Jane. This was like, I felt like some of these discoursey things that, like, I don't know, some of these little Shane.
Oh yeah, there's discourse. There's discourse in this book.
You wrote that just for me.
Well, I don't want to make it about your thing if you don't want it to be, but I think it's a what you've been through is an example of the kind of issue that Shane and Mood would probably clash over.
I
And
think so too,
and
yeah.
Shane is Mood's boyfriend, and he's very online, and he has a podcast called Down with America ? He, when Mood decides he's going to go to Iran to see his grandfather, Shane makes it this like, Western perspective gay political thing of like, how can you go back to a country that, where being gay is punishable by death? Aren't you condoning that? Shane's very much of a like, you're an enemy if you eat a chicken sandwich from a person, And for me, a lot of the book got unlocked actually when it was the pandemic, and I have 2 kids and a husband, and we had been quarantined a long time, and my husband was doing some work with this hotel chain, and their hotel was like not far from where we lived in LA, but totally empty. And they're like, do you and your kids want a break? Come stay in this suite. And we're like, really? Like, yes, we haven't left the house in months. And so we went, and my husband posted a photo, and then this white gay man who I know professionally, who I didn't even think had my cell phone, calls me while we're there in, peak pandemic. And it's like, dude, don't you know this hotel is owned by the Sultan of Brunei, and they execute gay people, and you of all people should not be there. And then hangs up on me before I can say anything. And I'm like shaking, and I have a guilt complex, and I'm, and then I was unpacking why I was so upset with my husband. I'm like, I think the real reason I'm so upset is because I've been in situations like this through my whole life where people in the gay community make me feel horrible about things like loving my parents, and it just feels really crappy, because the truth is, if it weren't for a series of events started by this person's American, culture, family, government, my family would never have had to flee a country, would never have lost family members, would never, it's all a chain of events. And now I'm being like screamed at for staying at a hotel. And that's where a lot of the stuff with Shane came from. And it unlocked something in my brain that's like, I want to find a way through story to make people see why, even with the best of intentions, I totally get why people are like, go boycott Chick-fil-A or go boycott this. And that's fine. Like, do your thing and find your pieces of activism. But when you're saying like, don't go to X country, don't like have anything to do with this place, well, that's easy for you to say when that's not a country you're connected to. But when all your aunts and uncles and cousins live there, it's a different thing. You have to find a way, and not, the world is not all black and white, good and bad. You have to find those nuances.
Yeah, I love it. Jason June. I just like, I think y'all are freaking geniuses, all of you. Jason June, your book also takes on some intra-community discourse. And I love the layers that you included, because, Riley does not equivocate when condemning femphobia in queer spaces. Like, that's something that he is like able to see with a lot of clarity and able to push back on. But then there are moments where the narrative challenges Riley's framing, and I would love to hear about how you thread that needle, because that was just beautiful.
This was sort of this whole book was my sort of gentle call in to the queer community, where it was like, you can read it at your own pace and just kind of analyze if you're ever a part of the discourse, if you're ever a Shane in this situation. Shane is the worst when y'all read Only This Beautiful Moment. Terrible. But what was really important to me was to make sure that every character at some point in the story could be read as the villain in somebody else's story, including Riley, where he gets a lot of commentary online, obviously, as his podcast starts to take off, because in this world, the Gaybutantes have a lot of pull, especially in the arts. They've got like Oscar nominees in their alumni, and Tony Award winners, and the inventor of an indestructible steel heel. Like, they've got a whole bunch of people. So they've got obviously a big combined following in the millions. So when they broadcast Riley's podcast on their socials, it gets Riley a lot of attention. And that attention includes people from all walks of life, from straight people saying like, you're a dude no matter how many heels you put on, dress like a man, to gay guys saying they are Team Skylar, who's the nemesis in this, the Shane of this story, and saying like gay guys don't like femme guys and you should be a whole other letter and you're not included in here, to other gender non-conforming people telling Riley, but in very aggressive internet yelly ways, you're bringing all of us down as other gender non-conforming people by saying that cis masculine love interests are the end all be all, the love that we should put on a pedestal, which is not what Riley was trying to do. And in certain lenses, you could see how that might be read that way. And so that was what I really wanted to play on, that just like you were saying, Abdi, the vast majority of the time, I feel like humans have the best of intentions and have their own fears and their own insecurities that they're trying to make sure don't hit them in the face anymore, and also trying to prevent others from experiencing those same, what they see as obstacles in their life. But even with your best of intentions, somebody could end up being hurt, and you've got to be able to process that, and you've got to be able to find that balance between like living your beliefs and understanding when it's a time to just let people be, and knowing that there are so many instances in life when there are a multitude, dozens, maybe even hundreds, thousands, millions of right answers in this situation. And just because somebody's answer looks different from yours doesn't mean it's wrong. And if you asserting your answer that feels right to you ends up hurting someone else, take that in and actually figure out how you can still assert yourself, but not have casualties in the process.
And so for Sonora, I wanted to actually, so queerness is very much in the mix kind of with this dynamic and this, this group of kind of, this group of friends that's coalescing. But I really love the explore, like the intersection of kind of survivorship and what that can look like for different people and what that can feel like, and also just thinking about Ari as an autistic character, Ari's selective mutism, and kind of the way, like in particular, kind of that becomes relevant to just her experience as a survivor, kind of at different stages of like that entire journey. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, in the Luis Ortega Survival Club, the event, that makes Ari into a survivor, it happens off page. So before the book starts, it's not on page at all. It's not graphic or anything like that. But I did kind of want to touch on the fact that disabled people and autistic people a lot are made victims a lot, especially in relationship and sexual abuse and stuff like that, and especially when they are not able to communicate in a way that is deemed as like clear communication. So Ari is semi-verbal. She doesn't speak for most of the book. And I really wanted to show that, like, that doesn't mean she can't, consent. It doesn't mean that she, like, they just, in her little group, once she finds her people, they have to figure out how to communicate with her in a way that works for her. So Shawnee will have like a notebook for her. Like every time she walks in the room, there's a piece of paper on her desk with a pencil that Shawnee left for her. And Ari thinks it's cute, even though she could just use her phone. Or she was like, "This is sweet." But like stuff like that, where they're like trying to communicate with her and trying to give her a chance to say what she wants, and to show like, little things like, can I hold your hand? Can I touch your shoulder? Is this okay? Type of stuff, and like getting a response before doing the thing, is also important. And consent can look different for everybody. So for Ari, it's really getting that verbal, or not verbal, but like, getting that consent, like from whether it's like a nod or like a text or like a written yes, like whatever it is, like making sure that something is okay. And it's not with Ari, it is mostly physical touch things that like they're getting consent for, but consent is just like, it goes so far into like, anything that like feels like it's your own autonomy. Like, so these kids are very like, it is really like kind of like a consent book. Like, it's very much like Ari kind of learning that like there's a scene, it's like a very small scene, so it's not really a spoiler, but like where like Angel and Jasmine are like kind of playing around, and Angel is tickling Jasmine. She's like, oh, ha ha ha, stop. And he stops. And Ari's like shocked by this because like, oh, like she was laughing, like I don't understand why he stopped. But like for him, it's very much like a thing like, well, she told me to stop, like I'm gonna stop, like I'm gonna wait for her to laugh and say, haha, no, I'm just kidding, like keep going, or like, or for her to tickle me back, and like, you know what I mean, like, so for them it can look a little different. For Ari, she would have to like, you know sorry, I'm like getting a little bit ahead of myself. But yeah, so I just really wanted to show like the how important consent is and how it can look different for everybody, and how not everyone expresses it in the same way, but that it's like just as important to make sure that everyone's comfortable, and just to know that before. Yeah. Sorry if that was a little jumbled of an answer.
It was perfect.
Okay,
Yeah, I
thanks.
just like, oh my gosh, like the way like there are like a million other questions that I could ask, or like just I could sit here gushing, but I also want to leave time for all of y'all to ask questions if you have them. And so I have one more of mine that I want to ask. So now is kind of your heads up to be thinking about questions and getting ready for that. And then I'm not sure if we picked a like distribution method, but like one announcement that we wanted to make is that our wonderful friend Julian Winters, Angel on This Earth, amazing human being, has kind of like donated, I think like 2 full sets of these books. So we have taken our revenge, and we are also putting some of Julian's books in the mix. So basically, we got a lot of free books. So I would say like, if you ask a question, right, like then you get
Okay.
dibs on a book. I'm guessing just based on the time, we're probably going to end up having more books than questions. So like another option might just be if like, if you found that you're here and you've got one book and like you really could afford one tonight, but now that you have heard this brilliance, maybe like one or two of the others are appealing to you, like, check in, because I think yeah, also too, Julian's books,
Mhm.
absolutely 10 out of 10, amazing,
Okay,
all of
yes,
them.
yes.
Okay, so my last question is for all of y'all. So one of the things that I really love, and especially love now, is the inclusion of like intergenerational positive relationships. So that can be sort of within families, that can be teachers, older students, like queer elders. um, I found that really powerful to read about, given kind of what's going on right now with you. We have a lot of bad faith actors out there who are actively cultivating this like groomer narrative, and like deliberately planting kind of these sort of conspiracies, and just making people very suspicious of what has always been a really important component of queer communities. And I think we sometimes see, so we certainly see that in a very intentional way coming from the right, but I see it sometimes on the left too, like anxiety about that sometimes from the left. So I don't think Matt Walsh is going to be receptive. But I would love to know, like, what would you say to any lefties who may have kind of, without even realizing it, absorbed some of that rhetoric? Kind of, how would you talk about that and kind of hold the need for safety, but honor those intergenerational relationships?
Well, I was just gonna say I saw this thing on Twitter recently. I don't do well on Twitter. Twitter's
Okay, Twitter.
Twitter's a world of shanes, and then sometimes I feel like I have to be there. But I want to be there, and I have been, I've been called groomer. One of my novels, like a love story, has been banned in a lot of places, and people take like sexual passages out of context, and then once a high profile person gets their hands on it, their followers start to threaten you and call you horrible things. And especially when you're a parent who spends the vast majority of your time with 11-year-olds, it's really hurtful because you're not only a parent to them, you're hanging out with their friends. You're like, I don't want this to be like someone looks up my name and these horrible people are spreading lies. But anyway, I was on Twitter recently and I saw a gay person saying something. I mean, I'll paraphrase it, but the basic idea was we were doing well with our rights until gay people started to like go for the kids. If you guys had just stayed away from like the youth, then we would all be fine. And it's kind of like, well, you would be fine, but what about the queer parents? And what about the queer kids? Like, what about the queer kids who need support? It was just I just feel like within the gay community, there can be so much, like, I don't know what the word is, but like, it's like, oh, well, I'm okay, so I don't care about that person. It's like I talk to so many gay people of my generation who aren't as supportive as they should be of trans rights and of young non-binary people. And I feel like I just want to hold their hands and take them into my school visits and have them hang out with my kids and their friends to see how not scary it is and to have them build that empathy to see we're one community. But I don't know. I do write a lot of gay mentor figures into my books. And like a love story, there's Uncle Stephen. In this book, there's a character named Zip Lamb in the 1930s who becomes a mentor to the young gay character in the 1930s. And I do feel like, most of us are not raised in queer families. Most of us don't have queer aunts or uncles, or I didn't have any of that. Like, we need that. We need the support of our own generational queer family community. And I actually think it's parents to find that. I think if you have a queer kid and you don't have queer people in your life, make sure they have them, whether it's teachers or mentors or building relationships. That's part of your job, is to find your kid those figures to help guide them and make them.
I guess I would say it is scary to get all these words and labels thrown at you that are just horrific and awful. And it can like burrow in there where you're like, what is real anymore? But I would say all media for all of time, essentially, has been a primer for heterosexual relationships, both romantic and physical. Every story that we have consumed for the majority of history has that at its core. Even if it's like, even if they're not saying this is a story about sex or whatever, it's still in there. That layer is still in there. Whether it's the male lead and the female lead like crushing on each other or winking at each other across the gymnasium or whatever it is, it's always there. And it's this example about how to have healthy or unhealthy relationships and how you can move through life in physical and romantic ways if that is what is something you want to have in your life. So it is the responsibility of older queer generations to give that to the up and coming generation. They need to have conversations about consent. They need to have conversations about playful, fun, amazing flirting. They need to have conversations about interactions that feel unsafe and how to steer clear of that and protect themselves from that. all of that is super important. We are building them up as functioning human beings. If a reader reads it that doesn't identify with any of our characters, then it's not for them and they set it down, and that's great. It's not this massive recruitment grooming effort. That's such an insult when people say that, because we all know I don't read or I don't watch Sex in the City and suddenly I'm Samantha walking through New York City. Oh my God. That's not how watching TV works. It's not how reading a book works. You know, I don't all of a sudden, because I loved Animorphs when I was a kid, I don't all of a sudden have the power to turn into animals. That's not what happens.
It's the dream, though.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Would be nice.
It would be amazing. So a presumably straight teen reading a book with a gay character in it isn't all of a sudden going to turn gay. If they're reading a book and all of a sudden they feel a spark of kinship and familiarity there, that was already inside of them, not caused by my book. And that book then is a nice example for them about how to enter the world that might be an interesting and loving and supportive place for them, as opposed to never seeing something or reading something that might give that spark of kinship and feeling like they're all alone. That's unsafe. And that's not, that is, as we all know, making the calls for banning and censorship are just to make gay kids miserable and try to fight who they truly are inside. And that's just, those people are the dangers and not us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, y'all said mostly what I would say. I think that, you know, kids really do need like to see positive examples of queerness and transness and all of it. I think the biggest argument I see coming from the left is like you said, kind of like queer people who don't understand like the gender spectrum and like non-binariness. And like for me as like a non-binary person, like it is very frustrating. And like I could talk about this all day, but it's literally just like I'm trying not to like get into science, but like I could scientifically explain why non-binary people exist, and maybe I'll do it in a book one day. But like it's hard for me to not get angry and to like kind of try to like meet people where they're at and say like, okay, and avoid saying you're using a 5th grade biology like understanding here, but instead of insulting them, like, and just like be nice about it. But the truth is, it is really hard to be the person affected by the rhetoric who to have to then go and like meet people where they're at. Like it can get very exhausting, and I'm not saying that it should never, like no one should ever do that, but like I think for all of us, like if we can just like have a conversation with someone about something we're not affected by, like whenever you hear it, like, you know, like if I hear a conversation about, you know, some issue that like I don't personally have a stake in, like I'm gonna feel that responsibility so much more to go and meet that person where they're at and say like, here, like explain it to them in a way that like they won't get defensive over, where I think that can go a long way, versus when they're attacking a specific person and that specific person feels attacked, isn't necessarily going to want to be like, I love you and I understand where you're coming from. You know what I mean? So like I think that understanding has to come from like people who don't have a stake in it, which is why I think like a lot of I think, sorry, I'm going off. But like I hear a lot of people, this is you know, a lot of like I'll say it, a lot of white people will go home for the holidays with their conservative parents and just complain about how horrible they are and how like, oh, they all voted for Trump, they're so horrible. But then they didn't say anything to them. They didn't have a conversation about why that bothered them, or, you know, when they have no stake in it, if they're not a queer person or they're not like a person of color, they can't talk about why this is racist, or, you know, but like if you have like family members or anything like that and you don't have a stake in it, like I guess my advice is just like say something, and like maybe in, you know, you can be respectful, and you can, you know, when you don't have a stake in it, it's a lot easier to be respectful. So I would encourage it, because that is how change gets made. But yeah, I think anytime you hear those kinds of conversations, it's really good to just say something, especially when it's people that will love you anyway. You know, like it's one thing if you know they're gonna drop you, but if they're gonna love you anyway, tell your grandma she's racist.
You gotta do it.
You gotta do it.
You're making me want to tell. One of my favorite interactions. I feel like you guys know a little bit about my family dynamic now. But one of my favorite interactions once when I was visiting my parents in New York, where they live, and it's a small apartment. I was working, and I could hear my son and my mom in the room, and my son was like, "Ili," to my mom. You know, he's like, "Ili, do you support the LGBTQIA community?" And my mom's just like, you know, she's Persian, and they just, you know, they avoid these kinds of. My mom's like, "Yes, of course I do, Ruby. Of course I do." And then he's like, "But do you only support the G, or do you support the L, the B, the I, the A, the D?" And my mom's just like, "I don't know what all these letters mean. I don't know, Rumi. I don't know." And I just was like, we should all be a little bit more like Rumi. You know,
I
just
love
like,
that.
you know, it's okay. It's okay. Sometimes you make people uncomfortable, but I
Yeah.
agree. I never turned my back on my family, but I also always had those conversations.
Yeah.
Even when friends of mine were like, "Why are you going there?" I'm like, "Well, I'm going because I'm slowly doing the work in my community
Yeah.
that I need to do. You go do it in your community."
Yes.
And if we all did that in our little communities, then the world would be a kinder place,
Yeah.
because not only would the people we're trying to convince eventually accept and love us, but those people also see that we are willing to love them and give them a little bit of space and our time and our respect. So, I mean, we have to do our part somehow. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know, because the world feels like it's spinning out of control.
Yeah.
It does.
It is spinning. Yeah.
It's
Quite literally, yes. But is it spinning out of control, or is it just spinning and all is well?
I mean, eventually it will spin out of orbit. So. I love this. I love this so much.
Oh God.
No, don't apologize.
I feel like I want to ask you questions. I feel like you know. I feel like you know something.
Wonderful.
That's a good segue, maybe.
yeah, that is a perfect
Yeah.
segue. Yeah.
So I'm going to bring the mic around to anyone who has questions. Just raise your hand. All
Wow,
right.
so many questions. I love this.
It was the book. It was the free book.
Yeah.
We're gonna start right here.
I'm really bad with names, but I'm really bad with names. Yeah, I'm asking a question. I changed my question. Okay. So my question for all of you is, how do you deal with my parents? They're accepting, but like my grandparents and all of them, like it's really hard to deal with. Like when you have stake in the conversation, like you were talking about.
Mhm.
It's just hard to deal with it and to like be like, yeah, I understand you're trying to come around and I'm trying to get you on my side, but it's really hard because right now you're not, and right now you think I'm an abomination, you think I'm going to hell, all that good stuff. Not good stuff. But so my question is, how would like you would say to deal with that, and how do you deal with that in like a respectful way? Because they're not being respectful to me, but I still want to be respectful to them because they are people in my life who are important to me and I love them and I want to show them that I still care for them no matter my identity and how I feel.
So I hope this can be like a little hopeful anecdote. My grandmother was extremely traditional Catholic, like very religious, pretty homophobic, all the things. It wasn't until like maybe like a year before she died, she just changed her mind. Like we had a conversation where like we were watching like a telenovela or something, and like there was two women kissing on the screen and she shielded my eyes and she was like she was like, don't look, like as if I am like 2 years old. But and then I moved her hand and I was like, why not? And she like was like, oh well, because that's not like godly or whatever. And I was like, okay, so let's talk about this because you know that I am like them. And so our conversation, I think that's not what changed her mind, but she brought it up to my mom, who, if your parents are very supportive, they can be your allies in this, and you can tell them like to continue the conversations that you have too. Because my mom continued the conversation with her, and then I talked to my mom about it, and we kind of like teamed up a little bit. And my mom decided to like introduce my grandma to her two like lesbian best friends who are like married. And because my grandma's all about respect, right? So this is maybe an idea of like meeting someone where they're at. Like they're all about respect. They're not going to disrespect someone who comes into their home. So she brought her two lesbian friends over who were like in a relationship, holding hands and stuff like that, over to our house. My grandma's being very respectful to them and like all of that. So I don't know. It's just, I do think it's possible for people to change their mind. My grandma did, and she eventually like apologized to me. And she like, even my dad, like he's come a super far away. Like after I got like top surgery, he was like, "You look more yourself," and I was like, I wanted to cry, but like so I think letting them see, let them see your vulnerability if you feel safe to do so. Because I think that's what really made the difference. My grandma didn't understand why it was hurting me so much, because to her it was just like a choice, you know. But I think letting them see, because if they really like care and love you, which I'm assuming they do, it's gonna hurt them to hurt you, you know. And I think a lot of the time we put up this wall when someone hurts us, and we don't want them to see how much they've hurt us. But with me, it really helped to just like let my grandma see me cry about it. And she was so like upset about it that she talked to my mom, and she was like, "How do I fix this?" Like, you know. So I think just showing vulnerability can go a long way too, even if you don't have like words like for how to convince them. It can just be like, "This really hurts," you know, and letting them see that they're hurting you, I think. Yeah.
I think even though we probably would want every single one of your answers in order to get to all the questions.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's you did it. That was beautiful. That was perfect. So, but I think we're gonna each one of you can maybe answer a question. Okay, I'm gonna rethink my question.
Hi, my name is William, he, him. So I have started like gaining interest in wanting to write books myself. And I just want to say, one, having this much queer joy in one room, it just has always given me a lot of hope. I have been out for a while, but I was very afraid to kind of be myself because of a lot of things that specifically JJ that you've discussed, with like feeling like you're not like enough in your community. I mean, all of you have discussed that kind of intersectionality and feeling like that. And I guess in terms of being authors, I wanted to ask any of you that are interested in answering why you kind of chose YA. And because I have been told before that there are things that I should not discuss in books. Like there are people that have, you know, even when I was like younger, people said I should not try and discuss like misogyny in books. And just how do you deal with that? Like what do you choose to put in YA books, and how do you kind of deal with like themes and topics and stuff like that in your writing process?
I think, first of all, to talk about whatever you want to talk about in any book that you want to write, because teens are in our world. They're experiencing our world. Little kids are in our world too. I think like I have a couple picture books that deal with death, and like kids understand what's going on. They might not know all the terminology and everything, but they know something's happening. And teens way more so understand like the dynamics of what's going on in the world. And even if they don't know all the intricacies, they know stuff is going on. They know gender dynamics. They know misogyny, even if they don't know the specific word. There's the energies all around us that they can feel. And I think it's really amazing to discuss those. It does them such a service, because when adults try to shield teens from anything that they know is happening, it does a sort of mind warp on a teen, because you're like, my reality is there's this thing happening that you're saying is not happening, and now we can't talk about it. What's going on? I think that is like so unfair to teens. So talk about it all. And in answer to the question about why I write in YA, it's because of that, because I knew like I was the only out queer person in school, and I knew that like there had to be, I couldn't always be this lonely, but I felt so lonely when I was a teen. And so I write YA now to let the kids know, even in 2023, we still have so many communities where there's a bunch of closeted kids or just one out queer person. And it's really shocking for like our city raised queer siblings to be like, wait a minute, people are still like in the closet as teens. It's like, yeah, lots of them. And some of us don't even come out till adulthood or figure more stuff about us in adulthood. So I'm writing that now to try to alleviate some of the loneliness that I felt as a teen. And even though it can't change my readers' surroundings, I hope it gives them that little bit of just boost to know, like, okay, it's such a cliche, but it will get better.
My question is for Abdi. In addition to being exceptional character studies and explorations of interpersonal relationships, your books are always set against a vivid historical backdrop, which educates readers about some significant issues, past, present, and future. So my question is, what is your process for deciding on and researching the historical elements of your books?
Oh,
Such a good
wow. This
question.
was so, I know. Thank you. Like the change. So I love history. I'm like a history nerd. I've always been obsessed with the past. It's funny, like I'll put references in my books. Like they'll be like kids dancing to Ella Fitzgerald. And my editor is always like, why are these kids dancing to Ella Fitzgerald in the 90s? And I'm like, in high school, my friend and I took the train to go see her at Radio City alone with no adults because we were obsessed with her. Like that's what we listened to. But that was always me. I was obsessed with like everything old, always. And as an adult, I've come to realize I really believe it's because I grew up in like with a vacuum of history. My parents, like so many immigrant parents, if anyone here is an immigrant, they tend to shield us from the past because the past for them is traumatic and they don't want that. They want their kids to make this fresh start in America, you know, and they don't want to bring all the trauma of the country. So I didn't know anything about Iranian history or the revolution or what my family went through. And similarly, you know, I'm old-ish, you know, I wrote like a love story about my adolescence and it's considered historical fiction. So there you go. You know, there was no, as I tell young people now, I had no access to queer culture outside of Madonna. It really was Madonna or nothing. And so I didn't have queer mentors or queer history or anything. So both sides of my identity that probably, you know, impact me the most, the Iranian and the queer, were just these voids. I felt like I was the first, the only, that nothing came before me. And so as an adult, so much of what I'm interested in is uncovering these histories that maybe aren't seen enough, that we haven't shined a light on enough. I mean, obviously many are personal to me. Like in Like a Love Story, I chose ACT UP in New York and the AIDS epidemic because we moved to New York when I was young. And I remember that. I remember having no access to queer culture, but my parents getting like Time magazine and the New York Times, and the covers would have, you know, gay men dying. And I would just be like, God. And, you know, I mean, with this book, I was always obsessed with old Hollywood. It was my world of fantasy. And I really loved the idea of putting this kid in old Hollywood who is queer and who like almost gets to live the fantasy before he realizes I couldn't be myself in this world. And it's like, it's a little bit of me also exploring like, why was I always as a child obsessed with these worlds that I would have been ostracized from had I been me in that world? Because in my fantasy, I'm like Rita Hayworth, you know, but if I'm me, I would have had no place. Like they would have been like, you like Iranian queer, get out, you know? So I guess that's a little bit of that. But I do think in general, and going back to like schools and book bans and all that, the biggest joy for me with the books is when I get to speak at schools and they teach the books at schools. And it's such a lesson to me in how much history is not taught. You know, I mean, with Like a Love Story, it sometimes is shocking to me to go speak to classrooms where teens know absolutely nothing about HIV/AIDS, let alone. And I when I talk to them, I'm like, my God, you guys, go talk to your parents, ask them where they were, what they thought. Like, this is your parents' generation. This was the biggest thing that happened in our generation. Bless you. You know, we were all impacted in some way. This is something you should be talking about. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Hi, so I'm a high school English teacher, and at least in the South, you know, there is a large push by the right to, you know, to push the kinds of novels that you guys produce outside of our classroom. And the way that we can get it back is by doing choice reading, where we have, you know, 6 copies of each of your books, and that's one of the different themes that students can pick between. But one thing that I miss from the 90s with like The Giver is that they have these discussion questions at the back of the books where I'll have 6 different groups reading 6 different types of themes, and they're coming up with their own discussion questions. Is that something that you would consider adding back into that with our current political landscape so that you can help direct students in those directions? Because obviously I can do part of it, but I have that interest. I'm pulling those books into my classroom, whereas other teachers who might be less skilled in that area could really benefit from your expertise and helping to shape that conversation.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but Like a Love Story and the Chandler Legacies have educators' guides. And my current book, Only This Beautiful Moment, will have one soon as I read it because it's in my inbox. But, these are guides. They're not in the books, but they're basically guides for classrooms, and they're designed by educators to steer conversation. So I think that's kind of that. They're not in. No. Like, did you remember that Iranian woman who was with her kid at our New York reading? She wrote the new one along with Shay. Do you guys know Shay Martin? Shay's amazing. Anyway, they collaborate to write it together, but they're very much driven by educators because I don't know the needs of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, publishers will still do that selectively, but we should start making like author calls and say, hey, put some discussion guides in these. Yeah, it's an important time.
You're all the experts of the characters and what you want to deliver through your themes and your voices.
Yeah.
So,
I would also say for you that most authors I know love visiting schools. Like, you'd be surprised, like, reach out to the authors. They might give you some guidance. They might also just be willing to like zoom in with the class for a nominal fee usually. I mean, it's so great when students are engaging with the text. And I get, like, for me, I know, like, when I started to discover queer media, it was usually like outside of classroom situations. And it was always like, oh, well, this is a hidden thing that I have to like, but to have it be like normalized in a classroom setting is so powerful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stand up because I'm short. Hi, I'm Stephanie. Thank you for coming and talking about your works today. It was very inspiring. I guess my question is if anybody has any words of advice for the self-doubting wannabe writer who kind of gets in their own way all the time, that would be great.
Yeah. So first of all, love that. Like, okay, so we all started being that, right? We all started there. I think the advice that I usually tend to give is don't take any advice as the end all be all. You have to follow it. Like, it's all supposed to be like, like, for example, write every day. Like, instead of just taking that and like, I have to make my neurodivergent brain write every day and like suffer through it, even if like the words are not coming and I stare at a blank page the entire day, like that's not productive. So like, what's the core of that advice is like, have a regular schedule, or like write regularly. So like, whether that's once a week, whether it's like, in the mornings or whatever days that you can swing it, like, I think it's helped me a lot to look at every piece of advice and think about like, okay, why was this advice given? What is the actual advice that I can pull from it and like take that? And yeah, I think also just like know why you're writing and what your end goal is. So like, if your end goal is to be traditionally published, you might go about it a little differently than if you just want to write a book for yourself or if it's fan fiction or whatever it is. So just keep end goal in mind like the whole time, I think is a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, I have a few different questions. I grew up with queer people. I have 4 mothers, no fathers. There's 2 of them there, and then there's another 2. With particularly with my other set of households, all of our friends are lesbians. I grew up around lesbians. I don't know how to interact around straight men. They scare me. But what I've noticed is that my mom's the other side, when I first came out, I was like, hey, like, I'm transgender, I'm gay, but not how you thought I was gonna be, the different breed of gay. And I would correct them when they would misgender me and they would get angry, like, it's so new, it's like only been like a few weeks, and then a few weeks turns into a few months, and then it keeps going. And I was like, well, how did, like, did you get mad when you first, because they talk about, oh, you know, we started this whole thing for you guys. And I'm like, then why don't you act like I'm doing that too? But I've noticed they misgender me more in front of their queer friends than they do around me. Like, it's always like she, her, and I'm like, who's that? So I just like, how do I like deal with that? Because they get embarrassed if I correct them in front of them, in front of their friends. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? Because I'm embarrassed when you're like, it's like my entire self is crumbling. So
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, I've been answering a lot of the questions, but yeah, I totally like get where you're coming from. Like, same here for like my parents have gone through a journey. So it helped to talk to them when they weren't doing the misgendering, like of course in the moment, like correcting and all of that stuff is like an option, but it helps when they're not feeling defensive. If it's just like, hey, something's been bothering me, I really want to talk to you about it, you know. Yesterday you were talking to your friend and you called me she, and it just really makes me feel XYZ. And if you could just, you know, like try to, you know, practice. Like I have a friend who literally, when I came out to her, she was like, okay, so your pronouns are they, them, there. Let me just give me 5 seconds. And she just goes, okay, my friend is Sony. They are non-binary. They go to my house every Sunday and we blah, blah, blah. And they, and then them and there, and they just did that for like a minute. And then they never misgendered me ever again. So like having them do like an exercise or something, be like, practice talking about me, like just practice it. You know, like something like, it sounds silly, but like it's really like about like just retraining your brain to like do this, especially with parents, because they're going to be attached to this like previous version of you. And with my dad, I just had to like let him know that like, okay, that version of me isn't like dead, but you were wrong about who that was, you know. And so it's like, yeah, he's trying. Like he'll, you know, I told this story when like me and my sisters come home and he was like, the girls are here. I mean, the thems are here. He's like, just like doesn't know how, but he's trying. Yeah, it's like so funny to me, but like I prefer that to like, you know, just full on like not trying. But yeah, so like kind of practicing I think is really good, and like telling them like if you have like, you know, it seems like you have like some of your moms here right now, like maybe you can no, that's amazing. Like you can maybe y'all can like talk to the other moms or whoever and be like, let's talk about our kid, and like just practice together, you know, like where you don't have to be there and you don't have to see it, the mistakes, you know, because that can be really hard. So like I think having supporters who are willing to do that, or just asking them to do it when I'm not here or whatever, that can be really helpful.
Are you
maybe you can call?
Are you guys gonna be here after? Like, can we ask you guys more questions after?
Yeah, so I think
for sure.
Hey, so I'm sorry, I'm kind of like geeking out over here. This is like so cool. So I grew up in a very conservative household. I had a lot of internalized homophobia for a very long time. Do you have any like tips for teens, like queer teens that are growing up in like conservative religious households?
I mean, honestly, I grew up in a pretty conservative household, not religious, but very conservative. And it's tricky because you have to develop your own community in a way. And I think that that's what's really hard is, you know, at least my instinct was always, because I genuinely love my parents and I love my culture. Iranian culture was so inviting, and it's like any community gives you that sense of safety, but when it ostracizes you at the same time, it's very confusing when you're young. And that's how I was. I was always like, wait, I want into this community, but they don't seem to want me. And so I think it's like the hard work of building your own chosen family, finding that community. And in a lot of ways, even though that's work when you're young, like I always think that being gay was one of the biggest gifts of my life because it forced me at a young age. I didn't have the easiest young years, but it forced me to really go out and build my own life and my own path separate from my family, who I still see all the time and still love. But, you know, I moved across the country. I started a new life. Like I literally moved in with my best friend. We called each other mommy and daddy. And we gave, I mean, people talk about chosen family. We were so literal about it. It was like we were mommy and daddy. We had a son. We had a daughter. Someone was my friend Lauren was granny. We had aunties and uncles. I mean, we literally formed a family. I'm not kidding.
Exact same thing. Like,
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I was a mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm still, and that's why, because I'm Abdaddy online, everyone's like, oh, is it? People first think it's like because I'm a dad now, because I'm like, no. It's because when I moved to LA, everyone called us mommy and daddy, and people started calling me Abdaddy. But you really do. It's almost like you have to forge. It's like you can still keep your ties to your family of origin and your community of origin if you want that, if you still want that in your life. But you also have to realize there's a certain amount of love and acceptance you have to get elsewhere and do that work into building those relationships. And in the beginning, it can be hard, but it can also be a real gift.
Yeah, that's the only thing I would also just like vehemently say is that love that so many queer teens in conservative families are waiting for does exist. And that would just be the extra reminder that I would back up Abdi on with that too. Is like, yes, find that family, and it might not be happening right now or on the timeline that you want, but it is out there. And when you can create your own world around you, it's going to be so magical.
Yeah. Well, can I add something? Is it okay if I talk again? Do it. Okay. When it comes to like religious parents specifically, something that I like to do that maybe they might not like, but is find Bible passages that argue your point. Because they're there, I promise. Like there are lots of them, love everybody, everything is there's so many. It's a big book, So just like you can look up like the passages and just like, it's their book. They're not gonna, I don't know. I liked to do that back in when I was dealing with like Catholic school and all that. But yeah.
We do also sell a number of affirming Christian books. So if you're looking for positive Christianity for queer and trans people, we do have those books.
I love that.
Becky, do you want to give us the final word? Anything on your mind? You're always such a wonderful MC. So give you the final word.
I mean, I'm not going to address that question because it's something that I'm like, I grew up in Reform Jew Democrat. And my issue is like compat, but should I kind of wrap us up? All right. Listen, if you're not already convinced, these 3 books and their backlist, these authors are legends. I feel so lucky to be like sharing this stage couch chair formation with them all. I'm so glad y'all are here. Thank you for being here. And thank you to the entire team at Charis. This has been one of my favorite bookstores since I myself was a young adult, visiting their other location when I was like as soon as I could drive. It's really special to be here. I think, I don't know, what is as far as like the Julian books, do you have like a way you want people to
I
claim
think
them,
if you
or-
asked a question, just go on up there and ask Brittany, who's behind the
Okay.
counter. Just tell her, I asked a question. I would like a free Julian book. And I'll make sure she understands what that means. And I think we do have more books than people who ask questions. So if you are sitting here hoping to have a book, just come see me and we'll make it happen. There are also lots of books for sale up front. There are still plenty of hats and tote bags. So please
Grab a hat. Take some for friends.
Get a hat and a tote bag. We are going to say goodnight to our friends who are watching virtually. You can click this teal button to buy all of the panelists' books.